If you haven't seen our take on the first episode, check out our channel. This is a continuation of the story. Let's get right into episode 2 entitled Tick-Tock Mr. Clock. Joyce and Murray's story. Murray shows up at Joyce's door saying he drove a long way to meet with her because he has intel that Harbour could be alive from a trusted source. Joyce says she saw Harbour that night and he couldn't have survived the blast. She doesn't want to get her hopes up. Murray says that they can meet with his confidant and he's just 20 miles away from her home. Joyce was hesitant at first, but Murray convinces her to hear him out. They meet with the confidant, who happens to be Ukrainian, and Joyce mistakes him for being Russian. The man says he knows of an American in Russia who was captured from the United States by the same people who built a base under Starcourt Mall. Joyce says that could be anyone. The man turns to Murray and speaks Russian, saying that over the past few months he has intercepted Russian communications. The Russians are up to something that can threaten not only the United States but the whole world. Joyce asks him what in the world is he talking about. He calls it Koniec Svieta. Murray loosely translated as Doomsday. Murray and Joyce head on home. Joyce doesn't know what to think of it. It could be anything, but Murray believes the man. Joyce tells Murray he can stay in the guest room for the night. As they reach Joyce's house, she finds her home was broken in. Nancy and Jonathan's story. Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan arrives at Hawkins Post. He asks for Nancy Wheeler and finds out that Nancy has a class at college. Although she's a junior reporter, she is taking classes part-time in broadcasting, keeping herself busy. Nancy leaves class early and heads to her car till Sullivan meets with her. Sullivan says he has to talk to Nancy and it's about the mind flare. Nancy is shocked. How does this guy even know about it? Nancy agrees to meet up with him at the local cafe. Sullivan tells Nancy that he had family in Hawkins, a brother and his beautiful wife and kids who mysteriously disappeared last year. Sullivan knows about the mind flare from the videotapes he saw. He believes Nancy was the one who leaked out the info about Hawkins' lab, and he actually worked with the same people Dr. Owens worked with, and he knows about the monster that consumed his family. Sullivan has been suffering from PTSD for some time and has recently retired. He says he knows that Nancy was there that night at Starcourt Mall because he was there too in the aftermath. Nancy gives her condolences. Sullivan says he came back to Hawkins because he needs to stop the mind flare. Nancy argues that the gate is closed. Sullivan says, "You don't understand. It doesn't matter if the gate of yours is closed. The mind flare, it's really a person." Nancy laughs at the idea. He says the mind flare lives in Hawkins and needs her help to find him. Nancy says he's the one who really needs help and leaves the cafe. He chases after her, screaming that she doesn't know the whole story. Nancy turns around and threatens to pepper spray him. He says, "You don't have to believe me if you don't want to, but we're all in danger. Every one of us. The upside down, whatever you call it, it's our world. It's the world of our future." Nancy looks horrified at the idea. The future? He tells him to leave her alone. Sullivan walks away mumbling to himself. Meanwhile, Jonathan already spoke to his mom and apologized for leaving. Jonathan and Argyle get their tire replaced. They head to the nearby diner. Jonathan is cash-strapped, but Argyle says he'll pay for it. Argyle tells Jonathan that he can't wait to see Nancy and is doing this all for love. Jonathan brushes him off, and we see the return of Collie and her gang entering the same diner. They cause a bit of a ruckus till an angry Jonathan stands up to them and asks them to shut it. They threaten Jonathan, and Jonathan grabs a gun from his side jacket. Collie gets in Jonathan's face. A waitress heads to the phone to dial 911. Jonathan notices Collie's number 8 tattoo and is startled. Her gang tells her to do something, but she hesitates. Argyle, who's freaked out that Jonathan had a gun, takes it away. Collie asks Jonathan if he knows Jane. Jonathan says he has no idea who that is. Collie is convinced that he knows more than he is letting on. Her gang head back to the van, stealing some of the food from the guests at the diner. Collie says Jonathan is lying. She's good at reading people. She grabs a Polaroid of Jane and asks Jonathan if she knows this girl because she has to see her because it's a matter of life and death. Jonathan says no, and as she was about to leave, Argyle asks, "Isn't that your sister?" Collie looks back and Jonathan says Argyle's just high. He has no sister, but he remembers some girl who had a tattoo back at Hawkins. But he had moved away. Collie doesn't believe him, but Jonathan shows Collie his driver's license, saying it's the truth. He just doesn't live in Hawkins anymore, and that he doesn't know anything about this Jane person. Collie leaves. Jonathan gets to a phone and tries to call home to no avail. They head outside to leave as Argyle says that the cops could be here in any minute. Jonathan says they gotta get back home, but Argyle argues that he can just call home at the next stop. Jonathan isn't sure what to do. Hopper's story. Hopper is in his cell till suddenly an alarm goes off and the cell door is unlocked. He runs out and tries to escape the facility and heads outside. Dmitri shows up and grabs Hopper. Hopper notices a Demogorgon chasing one of the guards. Another pops out and kills 2 guards. They get into a truck and Dmitri drives off, smashing through the front gate. Hopper says, "What in the world is going on?" Dmitri says he's doing what he had promised. Hopper says those things shouldn't be out there and asks if Dmitri let them free. Dmitri asks Hopper if he wants to go home or not. Hopper says yes. Then he tells Hopper to shut it. They finally meet up with Yuri the smuggler, who greets Dmitri. Hopper is out of the vehicle, and once he sees Yuri, he punches him straight in the face, knocking him down. Dmitri shoves Hopper and asks him, What'd you do that for?" Hopper starts cursing Yuri, and Yuri begins to laugh, saying, "What are you doing in Russia?" Dmitri asks how they know each other. Hopper says they knew each other from New York. Dmitri convinces Yuri to smuggle them to the States. Hopper starts to remember his past. It's a flashback to early 1979 New York. Sergeant Jim Hopper of the NYPD had lost his daughter a year ago, and his wife filed for divorce shortly thereafter. He hunts down a gang of thugs with his partner, a woman he's been affectionate with for some time and found comfort in, especially during the tragedy he had faced earlier last year. Among the gang members was Yuri, who runs off and Hopper arrests him. Unfortunately, Hopper's partner was killed in action. Hopper, who is emotionally broken, snaps and beats down Yuri in an interrogation room when Yuri tells him that his partner deserved to be shot, and Hopper told him he would ship his body back to Siberia. Hopper is then relieved from the case because he's taken it too personally. Hopper secretly works on the case at home and shockingly discovers his partner was killed by a fellow cop, and they were both bad cops dealing in drugs, a scandal that forces Hopper to quit the force and move back home to a low-crime, peaceful small town known as Hawkins. Steve and Robin's story. Robin stays the night at Steve's place. Steve tells Robin they gotta find out if the Demogorgons are back. They head out past midnight and Steve grabs his bat he used in Season 2 and gives a new bat he made to Robin. They head to the ditch Eddie had fallen in and try to look around but found nothing. Robin says she remembers Eddie back in high school when he had some kind of game club, but Steve says it's called Dungeons and Goblins or whatever, and Robin corrects him and says that's not even the name of the game. Suddenly, Eddie pops out of nowhere and they're shocked. The next morning, Dustin and Lucas are at a park. They have no idea why Eddie hasn't been responding to their radio calls, till suddenly someone dressed as a goblin jumps them from behind. The goblin takes off their mask and it's Erica. Lucas says she's not even in the Hellfire Club. Erica says not officially, but she's playing and they're idiots because they were supposed to find weapons first. Their characters are now dead. Lucas and Erica gets into an argument till Steve and Robin show up. Dustin, Lucas, and Erica get in the car. They're at Steve's place where Eddie stayed the night. They ask Eddie what happened. Eddie describes that he saw the faceless man walking around near his place last night and fought to follow him. Dustin says they have to find this Demogorgon. Steve argues that they tried to look for it last night, but no luck. Lucas says maybe Eddie didn't see anything and it's all part of the game. Dustin says he has some gadgets back at his house, and one of them is apparently a flamethrower. Steve tells Dustin he's a freak. They drop off Erica at her house, and she's angry they wouldn't take her along. Then they find Max riding her bike across the street to get to Lucas's place. Lucas asks Steve to let her in. Steve says he just dropped off one kid, he's just not going to take another. But Lucas shouts at Max constantly, and Steve lets her in the car. They head to the forest to hunt down the Demogorgon and find it. They're all shocked. Lucas was sure the gate was closed. It stands still. Dustin is readying for his flamethrower till Eddie says to wait, and he approaches the Demogorgon and tries to speak to it. Steve and Robin look at each other like he's nuts. The Demogorgon starts to run and stops. Eddie says it wants to be followed. The gang looks at each other and wonders if they should. Max says there is no way she's going to follow that thing, and Lucas agrees. Will and Elle's story. Elle tries to see if her powers are back at home, but she fails at it when she attempts to move a Nintendo game. Will convinces her it must have been a freak accident, but maybe she'll get it back one day. Will is invited to the new laser tag place in town by his friends. Elle says she doesn't want to go. Will says it'll take her mind off of everything and that the comic book convention was probably just a bad idea. Elle refuses to go. Will then says he won't go because he'll be worried about her. Elle says she's scared if something happens again. Will says he doesn't think it will and promises she'll have a good time. They head out for laser tag and Elle has a lot of fun. No powers, no worries, and Will's friends actually love her. They eat pizza and she has a great time. Elle feels good. Elle and Will head back home to see Joyce and Murray in shock that the place was broken in. Joyce wants to know what's going on. Will says they have no idea, they were out. Joyce wants to call the cops, but Murray says just not yet. He says this doesn't look like a break-in because nothing was really taken. Joyce says, "What are you talking about?" Murray asks if they have a basement. They head down and see something terrible. The floor is cracked open. It lights up for a moment. Elle is frightened. Joyce asks Elle if she had anything to do with it. Will tells Joyce she doesn't have her powers. How could she? Joyce apologizes. They head out of the house after calling the fire department to investigate. Mike's story. Mike comes over to Max's house in the morning and she's a bit surprised. Mike says that he's decided to go see Elle and surprise her. It's the start of spring break, and his mom, who's a real estate agent now, is okay with it. He asks Max if she wants to go with him. There is a flight that leaves in 2 hours and it'll be fun. He'll even buy the ticket for her from money he saved from his nana. Max says she just can't go and had plans with Lucas. Mike says screw Lucas, he's just too busy with that stupid Hellfire Club game to notice. Max says she can't go. Mike says he just doesn't know why he even bothered and starts to leave. Max says she just wants to see Elle but can't just fly to another state without asking her parents, and that she just can't leave Lucas like that. Mike says, "Maybe you were never friends with Elle." Max is upset and tries to call Lucas on the radio, but he doesn't respond. She heads on out, and that is when she meets with the gang to see the Demogorgon. At the end of the episode, Mike takes a cab from the airport in Maine and is excited to see Elle, only to notice a crowd in the neighborhood, a fire truck, and police. Mike gets out of the cab and finds Elle, Will, Joyce, and Murray in the distance. Mike says, "Elle?" Elle turns around, and the episode ends. So what did you think of this concept episode? Do you want to see an episode 3, You Snooze, You Lose concept? Subscribe to our channel, like, and stay tuned for more content.